Welcome to DGT Live. I'm your host, Johnny Walker, and this is the show that we talk about everything The Walking Dead. Yeah, I'm saying that this week because Dead Guy Ty got hung up. He is holed up in some basement somewhere with walkers beating the door down. But I digress. We have a special guest, and not just made of barley and hops. I have a special guest today, and that is Ted from the Card Sphere. So thank you, sir, so much for joining us and talking everything Walking Dead.
Hey, you're welcome. Longtime fan, and I'm excited to be on the show.
Excellent stuff. And you are coming in from Ottawa, Canada. So it's a little bit later than it is from where I am in the West Coast.
Yeah, it's a little bit later and probably a little bit colder. So not quite spring for real yet.
Sure, absolutely.
Good,
so
keep the walkers frozen.
Oh yeah, like in season 2, right? We got to see kind of cold weather once. We'll still never see snow, right?
Right.
Oh. Oh well. But anyways, Ted is from a fantastic website called the Card Sphere. If you guys follow, if you follow DGT or They Said We Said It All on this channel, you will see that I also do a couple things with Magic the Gathering. So Ted, why don't we take a little bit of time and tell the audience, the deadheads out there, a little bit about your website you got going on.
Sure. Well, CardSphere is a peer-to-peer buying, selling, and trading site for Magic cards, and you do the mail through post. And if you're someone that's looking to trade cards that you have for cards that you need, we actually have the lowest price on the internet, the lowest cost of operating. We only charge people 1%, and that's on the sender side per trade. And we've been in business about 8 months, and we've done, I think we've moved $600,000 worth of cards, and we're approaching 10,000 users before our first anniversary. So anyone that plays Magic should come and check us out.
Excellent. Awesome. That is so cool. And I would love to have Ted on the Hive Mind, which is the other show that we do Magic Gathering wise. But why don't you tell the audience about your kind of experience? You said that you were a celebrity in the Walking Dead community, right? So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about that?
Well, that was a little bit of a joke. But my brother turned me on to the Walking Dead very early in the comic. And he had a letter printed in, I think, the first 20 issues.
That is awesome.
And he wrote into Kirkman saying, hey, I love the book, and it's gotten me back into reading and buying comics regularly. And, so he would drop by my place and drop off each issue, and I'd read them through. And it kind of reinvigorated my love for comics again, too. So Kirkman sure came along at the right time.
Absolutely, he did, and has my usual co-host, Dead Guy Ty, likes to say, Robert Kirkman is my mother because Chris Hardwick is my father. He said I look like a mash of the two of them. I don't know. Yeah. I still don't get it. I think you and I kind of look like. Maybe we could be brothers.
Yeah, I got a bit more off the chin than you, but.
You do. I'm working on it, but it gets to a point for me where I just go crazy, so I just hack it off. But I can't never go back to just nothing because I look like a fat baby.
Yeah.
But right. But I also brought another special guest, as typical in DGT Live fashion. Today I have brought with me a Silver City Superfly, and that's Super, not super. It has an A. Superfly. This is a 6.5%. It's an Indian Pale Ale. I want to thank Christian from Northwest Beverage for hooking this one up. Thank you, sir. My dark confidant, so to speak. We'll just talk Magic. Why not? But this one is this one's going to be pretty good. It is hops, Cascade, Mosaic, Pilsner Malt, Flaked Wheat, IBU of 52%. Can't wait to crack this one open. So again, thank you, Christian from Northwest Beverage, for hooking this one up. And Ted, do you have a special guest with you tonight?
I do have a special guest. I went and took a look in the fridge, and the only beers that I had were things like Coronas and Steam Whistles, which are, lighter beers. So that's the kind of beer that I drink. My wife drinks the IPAs, and I mean, she goes for stuff that's so bitter that it just tastes like poison for me. But I did see that we had a batch 1904 cider, and this is from Toronto, Canada. So I thought I should represent, and it's a nice clean apple cider. It's pretty light. I've never had it before. It's 5%, and if I'm honest, it tastes like every other cider I've ever tasted.
Nice. Well, it sounds delicious, and from what I've heard, I haven't experienced too many Canadian beers, but I know there's like a big craft movement with that with Canada lately, and that's a cool thing to be part of. I just poured this into my Walking Dead Stein. I'm rocking Glenn tonight. I'm not rocking Rick like usual, because I would feel like I was cheating on Tyler. So I'm rocking Glenn tonight. This has like a Snow White head on it. It poured like a unfiltered IPA. So I'm going to be chewing on this all night, and maybe we'll talk about it later at the end of the episode. So you know what? 10 minutes into this thing, and let's talk about why we came here. This is the review of The Walking Dead Season 8, Episode 12. This title was called, or the title of the episode rather, is The Key. And, coming off of last week's episode, which was arguably one of the worst episodes of The Walking Dead ever, not just, and this is just, me talking. I don't know if you share the same opinion, Ted, but it was a shit show last week. It was absolutely terrible. But this week, what a bounce back. The Key, to sum it all up, what a good episode finally. What were your initial thoughts of last week's episode and then this week's episode of The Key?
Well, I've kept the faith better than most people that I know, and I know a lot of people that have knocked off this season. But I gotta say, yeah, last week is probably the low point in the series for me. And this season, the latter half of it has really started to drag a bit, and I think they're stretching out All Out War a bit too much. But I feel the same way. I was really happy with episode 12. I thought they got their pacing back. Like shit was actually happening, and it was interesting stuff. We got to see Negan acting like Negan.
Right.
One thing that I think never really came fully across in the earlier episodes, one thing that I felt like the show was always missing over the comics was Negan's relationship with Lucille. And,
right.
When you've got him running at Rick saying, "Don't you touch her," clear that, the man's in love.
Absolutely. The man is in love with his wood, which he names, spoiler alert for the comic book, he names after his wife. But yeah, in that opening scene, what a great scene, right? That they're them just kind of getting ready. And at this point of the season and this point of the series, and I've talked ad nauseum about the difference, the nuance is between Negan on the show and Negan in the comic book. But like you said perfectly, this was the closest to comic book Negan that we've gotten, if not for, lately, forever. Just him sitting in the car, kind of dipping Lucille in the sauce, and just like, "Baby, you look beautiful." Like that was just like, that was a great scene. And I loved it because it did show that loving dynamic between, he and this inanimate object. But Lucille is a character. Lucille's a character, and that comes across in the comic book, and it should come across in the show, and it kind of hasn't until this episode, like you said.
Yeah, I did think it was a little bit of a push to see Lucille on fire. Also, it's like they were in the writer's room, and it's like, okay, Lucille's a badass. How can we jack this shit up? They're on fire, right?
Right.
So that was just something I noticed, but I was still cool with it.
Yeah, it was super flashy, but it was a great scene. So let's kind of slow cook it just a bit. So the saviors have this plan, and they start saddling up, and Simon goes over to Dwight and basically says, I want you to ride with me because, like the kitten, that killed the canary, Dwight has some secrets, especially what he did with with how he handled the dumpster folk, the garbage pail kids, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. So he is already knowing he's in trouble with Negan, right? So that's why it looked like he preemptively is kind of trying to recruit people, and the best person to recruit is another lieutenant in Dwight. Little does he know what's going on there. But what do you think about the whole? Well, there's so much to unpack there, but first off, what do you think about what's going on with Simon, his plan? He's basically saying he wants to wipe people out and all this stuff, but not only just what's going on with Simon, but what's going on with Dwight now. Are you buying that Dwight's still completely on the survivor side, or do you think that he's starting to kind of buy into what Simon's selling?
Well, first of all, about Simon, one thing that sort of tripped me up was, and I'm not sure if it's how it was just played out, but I was actually thinking that Simon was still invested maybe in trying to trip Dwight up, right? Okay. And try to get Dwight to say something. And I'm still not sure that's not his plan. Because, maybe he's thinking, I fucked up with the garbage people, and I've got to take care of that. And, maybe I don't trust Dwight 100%. But then, when Simon started acting on the sort of the little coup and taking it a bit further, it does seem like maybe, hey, this is actually what's going on. And I hadn't actually really thought about whether or not Dwight would buy in. I think Dwight is Dwight's a cautious dude, and I think he's gonna sit on any fence as long as he can. And but ultimately, I'm rooting for him being a good guy as much as he could be.
Sure, and it just seems like, again, total polar opposites from the comic to the show. It seems like Dwight, like you said, is kind of a fence sitter, and at this point, put yourself in the position of Dwight's mentality. It's just like he jumped over to the survivor side because he hates Negan. Well, if you take Negan out of that equation, and even though that Simon's kind of more of a I don't know, totalitarian or something, he's more of a extremist, so to speak. Hey, he's not the one that did all the things with Sherry. He's not the ones that branded his face and did all these things. And if you look at it, when the end game for Dwight, when he goes back to the survivors, is Daryl and Tara want you dead. So what's the kind of thing that's keeping you around there?
Right, and plus Sanctuary works, right? Mm-hmm. Sanctuary works. He does have ties in that community, that sort of thing. And maybe the best play for him would be to try and seize the bat, so to speak, and become the leader or a co-leader and make a peace. Maybe he gets to play both sides of the fence, right? He can make a peace and stay away from Tara and Daryl.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go over to the hilltop a little bit. So we get Rick showing up in the beginning of the episode. It kind of picks up where the end of the last episode kind of leaves off. And so, Rick gets there. We get that nice back and forth between he and Daryl. And I was giving Rick a lot of shit these past two episodes with the passing of Carl. Spoiler alert, if why are you watching the show if you don't know that? But I was giving Rick a lot of shit for not showing enough emotion that his son just died. In that conversation that he had over the radio with Negan, Tyler and I talked about this before. It looked like Negan was more affected than his own father was. And, I know that Rick is kind of using, just kind of trying to keep his shit together, or for lack of a better word. But it looked like that he's actually starting to break down where Daryl's just like, are you okay? Or he gives him that look and Rick's like, I'm okay. And then he kind of starts breaking a little bit. And then, he kind of shows some chinks in the armor. I kind of liked finally that we're seeing some emotion from Andrew Lincoln's Rick.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, there's also an argument to be had about, the fact that this man is completely shell-shocked, right?
Right.
He's had the wife die. He's experienced the death of a child before, right? He thought Judith was dead,
Sure.
right? So, not that you could ever dull that completely, but I didn't think he was too much out of order. But as a viewer, one of the things that I do want to watch is a Rick that is trying to keep his shit together when the world's pulling him in all these different directions. Rick at a character at his best is when he's suffering the internal conflicts and the conflicts with his group and a greater threat. That's when you're going to see the best work out of Lincoln, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's great, fair points. And then going over to Maggie, Maggie's kind of in control of the whole thing, and at the hilltop, and she's just kind of having conversations with Michonne and with Enid. Enid a little bit is I guess the other way, where I feel like she's overdoing a little bit. I forget the actress's name, but I thought she was pretty great in probably like season 6 when we get her introduction. She was this kind of unknown character because she doesn't have a comic counterpart, so she was just this person that would kind of go to these different communities and then leave. It's the fan. Now it's like the writers kind of want you to forget that arc with her, and now she's just the person that gives too much shits. I don't know, but she was kind of acting overacting in my opinion, and wasn't very, I don't know, it kind of took me out of it a little bit. And Michonne was the one, and Michonne has been the one that's been affected by Carl's death the most, at least on face value so far. So I don't know. What did you think? Did that kind of bother you at all, the whole Enid and Michonne interaction?
I think that I did a rewatch of the episode just to sort of pay attention more to what I really thought of it. And when you're talking about Enid and Michonne in this episode, I think I can deal with Enid being a bit whinier and self-pitying. I mean, she's supposed to be a teenager, right?
Sure.
And the thing that I liked when Michonne told her to step back, and I love that. I wish there was a little bit more fangs to it. I don't feel like Michonne projected that she was barely containing her anger at that point. She was a little bit too calm, and I thought that on the second watch through as well. But I really dug the second scene of them when they're up at the on the wall, and they were talking about what Carl would have actually wanted. And I don't know if you noticed this. This is going to sound a bit film student-y, but they had the word school, right? Because the school bus was there, and Michonne, I felt, was schooling Enid, right?
Yes, nailed it, dude. You nailed it. Absolutely. I did notice that. I like that a lot, and I wasn't going to bring it up because I don't know. I didn't.
It's too film student-y.
Hey, it's great though. It's a nice segue to my next point. You could so tell the episode's directed by Greg Nicotero, right? You're gonna get two things with Greg Nicotero shot or directed shows or episodes rather, and that's great walker effects because he holds that shit near and dear to his heart, and actual scenes where it looks a little bit more cinematic than some of the other episodes.
Yeah. I like that because, even though sometimes I'm a little bit aware of shots like that, when I notice it, it also sort of gives me a little bit more faith that they're crafting the show, instead of just slogging it out, which is what a lot of this season has felt like, right? So
absolutely, a lot of this season and last season. I mean, there's only so much that you could try to make people walking around in a forest look riveting, and people walking and talking before you're just like, this is Star Wars prequels in an uglier setting. I can't take it anymore. I need something to look at. Give me some kind of artistic lens on this. 100%. I 100% agree with you. And so let's talk about there's two main points that came out of this episode. And the first one, since we're talking about the people talking on the awning, so to speak, is the note they find from a random person. So I don't know. I know you're pretty versed in the comic book. Are you caught up to the current issue?
I'm not 100. I'm probably I tend to read them in batches, so I think I'm probably maybe 6 or 7 issues behind. But I do admit that I went online and did a little peeking around about the Confederacy. So
Right, the Commonwealth.
the Commonwealth. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah, I know what you meant. But yeah, and that is what the internet, or at least the Walking Dead family, is a buzz by right now. That's what's setting the Walking Dead, community on fire right now. It's just like we don't even have a hint or a wink to the Whisperers, but we're getting the Commonwealth. Like, this is a thing. I don't know. Is this worrisome to you? Because at this point, and my first reaction, and I know Gimple has said in the past that, okay, the Whisper War in one form or another is going to happen on main Walking Dead. Not Fear, but The Walking Dead. It's going to happen. But my knee-jerk reaction to this was, seeing, George, her name's Georgie in the show. She might be some kind of analog to Pamela Milton from the Commonwealth, from the comic book. I was just like, oh shit, are they going to skip the Whisperer War? Are we going straight to something like the Commonwealth?
Yeah, no, the way that she said that she would be back, I think it was more planting a seed. So, but as far as the Whisperer War, I'm a little bit worried about them getting it right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you guys have covered this, but when we were first introduced to the Garbage People, I thought the Garbage People were the Whisperers, and it was basically, I felt like maybe there was a production decision that the Whisperer War would be too difficult to do, or whatever. They decided to replace it with another arc. Because, I mean, Jadis and Alpha have an awful lot of crossover, right?
Absolutely.
So, and I think there's a possibility that Jadis becomes Alpha,
right.
and some time passes as well. But now that Jadis has her own special guest, I mean, that kind of throws that into, I don't know what's coming on the show, and I guess that's a good thing, right?
It is a good thing, and that is like something that we were all worried about, or a lot of Walking Dead fans were worried about when they made the decision to kill off a main character like Carl, because he is, that wasn't just the one thing. I'm like, oh, Georgie might be Pamela Milton from the Commonwealth. That bodes, badly for the Whisperer storyline. Are they going to rush through it? Are they trying to wrap the show early? It wasn't just that. It was with them making the decision to kill Carl off, because Carl basically becomes your POV character in the Whisperer War.
Right.
He is more of a main character than Rick Grimes is, later on in the comic book. So that's why I'm like, oh my God. So they killed off Carl, and now they're introducing Pamela Milton, maybe from the Commonwealth. Like, is this show renewed for season 9? Like, I'm frantically looking on the internets, but lo and behold, and once I'm like you, I knee-jerked at first, and then I kind of took a step back and I said, okay, she, and she even says to Maggie, when she gives all the things to her, or that kind of blueprint to make a community, I'll be back later. So it does, it lays groundwork, and then maybe she will pop up later, and it might not be the Commonwealth, it might be, but it might be something like, we never got. Sometimes The Walking Dead does these things like the PPP, when Heath went missing, right? When they first went to Oceanside, and we get that PPP card, and we, everyone thought, myself included, that was a hint at the Whisperers. It turns out it might be a hint to whatever, community Georgie's a part of.
Right. Well, and you have to think that if you think about when the Whisperer War more or less started in the comics, Hilltop was a little further along, right? So there was a bit of a time gap. So I mean, right now, what they have a forge, but they were really further along when Alpha did the sort of infiltration to the fair, and so I think that we're going to see some kind of significant time gap represented somehow in the show as well. And but the other point toward the same sort of fear about are we skipping too much with the Whisperer War? Is other pieces, so we don't have Carl, and Negan isn't necessarily where he should be, and doesn't necessarily look like he's headed in that direction, and Eugene's not in the place he would be. So whatever we get, it's going to be quite different.
Absolutely. And so let me ask you this question, Ted. Or do you watch Fear the Walking Dead as well?
I do. And it's funny, I was talking to my boss about this the other day. We were going out for lunch, and he was telling me that, or I was telling him that I was coming on to talk to you, and we got on the subject of Fear the Walking Dead, and I don't mind it. I watch it. I liked the last season, but my boss just hates it.
Oh, no.
and he said, there isn't a single character on the show that I give a shit about. And,
oh, no.
And so, I told him that I really liked the last season. I liked the ranch storyline, but I'm a little bit worried about the crossover stuff, and how that's going to get handled.
Well, let's talk about that. What are your concerns about it?
Well, my main concern is that Atlanta is way too far away from the border. So, I mean, how long has oh my gosh, how long has Morgan been walking, right?
Right.
And the timelines are already a bit weird because it doesn't feel like Fear the Walking Dead has had a lot of time yet. Mm-hmm. And if Morgan's going to be meeting those guys, I almost feel like he would have to be out there and then come back to get into the main show timeline properly.
So I know at the end of Fear the Walking Dead season 3 and The Walking Dead season 8, that's what we're in now, right? Yeah, Walking Dead season 8, they're going to do a time jump to kind of link the timelines correctly, because like you said, Fear the Walking Dead is set in the past. That was showing you day one, and yeah. Again, Tyler and I have talked about, we did a complete Fear breakdown of all 3 seasons, and like I said before, I wish they would have spent more time on day one, because that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see it in LA because I was from California originally, and I wanted to see kind of patient zero and day one and week one, and they kind of rushed through it, unfortunately. But
that's how they sold us the show.
Exactly. False fucking advertising.
It's like they sold it. You finally get to see the start of everything, and then it was 6 episodes and until full on infection, or whatever you want to call it, full on epidemic.
Yeah, and Fear, I loved Fear season 1, those 6 episodes, even though I was watching something on a different, whatever than they were selling us. Season 2 was a pile of dicks. It was terrible. Season 3, however, like you said, was great, and it really was. I mean, it was really good. It arguably better than some of the newest Walking Dead episodes or seasons.
I'd agree with that. I liked the struggle between the ranch and the natives, and I thought there was really interesting conflict there. But when I think about the things that my boss Gilles said as well, the challenge he had was that he couldn't get invested in them because he felt like the characters would often stray from their primary motivations too much. So, it's like all of a sudden Nick seems like a totally different guy from the Nick that you had 2 weeks ago. And I think that's fair. But I've got a pretty high tolerance for zombie fiction. So
right. But yeah, but the whole reason I even asked you if you're caught up, but we were talking about the Whisperers and Alpha, Jadis, Judas Priest might turn out to be the show version of Alpha. So did you ever, or do you still think it's a possibility that Madison is going to be Alpha?
Oh, I don't think anyone ever. I don't think that question has ever been put before me. Would that work? I don't think.
Yeah, why not?
I don't know. I don't think I couldn't see Madison ever adopting the dumbass speech patterns. I think that was kind of bullshit. But yeah, that would mean that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't think about the daughter. What's the daughter's name on the show?
Oh, Alicia.
Alicia. Yeah, so that would make her figure prominently in the show too.
Yeah,
Or,
because well, kind of right because she's supposed to that character in the comic book. I forget the Alpha's daughter's name, but she's supposed to be kind of Carl's love interest, right?
Right. And then of course when we were introduced to Enid, that was sort of slotting in there too. So it's hard to sort of exist in the world where you know both the show and the comics, and now you've got another show and tying the world together because there's a lot of possibilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think at this point, it's either going to, and I think that, and again, we've talked about this on the show before, but to my, the 30 people that will watch this video, bear with me. I think that at this point, how the show is set it up, I think it's for sure, it's 50-50 between one of those two characters becoming Alpha. I think it's either Jadis at this point because she didn't have a counterpart, and they built her character up so much, and they gave her some of the best scenes. I used to hate Jadis, by the way, but a couple of episodes ago, The Lost and the Plunderers with the meat grinder scene was some of the most riveting, cinema moments on The Walking Dead ever. So they're either built up Jadis to take over or to take on that mantle of Alpha, or I think it's going to go to Madison, and she's just going to go straight villain. Because a lot of times when you watch Fear the Walking Dead, we're like, are we watching a group of villains in the making? The only person that was like morally attached was Travis, and he was gone far too soon.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see it. I think Madison would be a good surprise, but I think that's kind of a long bet. Myself, I mean, to me, it's Jadis, but I mean, it could also be they could also do a third party, or they could gender swap the Alpha character. They've done that in a number of cases so far,
Sure.
Right? And usually in the other direction. So, maybe the comic character of Beta, they end up hiring some huge, massive guy, maybe the dude that played the Mountain on Game of Thrones, and he comes.
Sweet.
Well,
sweet.
He's a big dude, right? Beta's supposed to be pretty big, so
Ted and I are starting a Kickstarter right now. We're gonna get the Mountain hired for Beta.
That sounds good.
Hell yeah!
But I would like. I think the actress who plays Jadis is doing a good job. I like to watch her on screen, and I think I'd be happier with her. And definitely would be happier with her as Alpha than any more Jadis and garbage people coming back, anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, so let's talk about the kind of the biggest moment of the episode. Kind of scaling it back to the key, the biggest moments and some of the best moments of this episode, and arguably the best moments of The Walking Dead for a very long time. So the Saviors are on their way to Alexandria with their newly, dipped guts weapons. They're going to go make a statement. They're going to go scratch a few people and turn them and do this. And hey, we got chemical warfare. But however, Rick takes it upon himself to crash into Negan. And then we just have some of the coolest moments of this show. I love that Rick just walks up like the Terminator, doesn't say a word. There's no TV show exposition.
Yeah.
You still alive? Hey, blah, blah, blah. Or, all this bullshit, right? That you see in all the TV shows. He just walks up and starts firing at Negan. I love it so much. They have a little scuffle. God, just what were you like? I was, for the first time in a while, and like I said, I love The Lost and the Plunderers. I think that was the best episode of the season. But when this was happening, I was just like, I kept checking my watch, and not just because you know, sometimes when I check my watch and I'm watching The Walking Dead, I'm like, okay, they're really walking through the foliage. But this time I was like, I don't want it to end. I kept
Yeah.
checking my watch to be like, oh God, I just want this to keep going, to keep going. The banter between Rick and Negan was fantastic. We got funny Negan, we got scared Negan, we got all Jeffrey Dean Morgan did his best work of the series, and Andrew Lincoln really came to play. What did you think about this scene?
Well, I agree with you. I like that there wasn't a lot of exposition after the second crash there. One thing, the first thing that popped into my head though was the Pulp Fiction scene with Butch and Marcellus Wallace at the end, because it's even like the same angles, right? And I'm like, oh, Rick's gonna go all Butch on this, and anyway, so that like leapt out at me the second time, especially, I guess. But maybe I was watching it with that kind of discriminating eye. But I totally dug it. I love the fight. I love the when Rick ran out of bullets and Negan's like, come on, bring it up here, and Rick just chucks his hatchet. Always like seeing Rick with a hatchet, right? It didn't have the red handle, I don't think, which was a disappointment.
Oh, but, wow! Look at you.
But then Negan falling and that chop. I mean, I knew Rick wasn't going to chop Negan in the head in that moment, and that Negan was going to drop. But it got me excited. And
did you think he was going to hit him in the hand? I thought he was going to hit him in the hand.
Yeah, no, he was. That's it. But I mean, really, he could have ended it right there, right? But maybe he wants to play with him a little. I don't know. Down in the basement, it was pretty cool fight. I did like the dialogue back and forth between them. It gave us a lot of opportunity for really experiencing Negan, and because the Neganness of this episode is probably what made me happiest, right? I like seeing it, and my sort of, if I was in the theater clapping with the audience moment would have been when Negan screamed, "Don't you touch her," when he realized that Rick had his hands on his lady, like
that's right.
It was just a little bit too much for him to bear.
Absolutely. It was so much fun, and it's so funny too, because when Negan fell, from the whatever floor to that basement, and Rick's just like, "You still alive?" And he's just like, "Oh man, I'm a cat." But his main concern isn't like, he even looks at the walker fall down, and he just looks at that as like an inconvenience of him getting in the way of finding Lucille,
right?
Which I liked quite a bit. But the back and forth, and one
iron pole.
What's that?
When he tossed away the iron, he had some kind of like pipe or something, and he was like, "Fuck this!" Tossed it away.
He said, like, "You're not her," or something like that, and just drops it. It was great, and that's what we've been waiting for. This is what we've been clamoring for, is a fun, entertaining Negan. But what was it? But we did get a serious kind of unveiling at this point, and that is Rick pretty much telling Negan about what happened to the Garbage Pail Kids, because at that point Negan was actually putting a pretty solid deal, and that goes to his weakness as a character. He's just like, and that's what Simon's talking about. If you're part of the Savior team, maybe Simon is your guy, because after all this shit that prick has done to you, Negan's just like, okay, I respect you, because Negan respects strength, right? That's why he loved Carl. That's why even with Rick, the person that's putting him through so much bullshit and so much grief, the one community that's effectively standing up to him, he was giving him like a 25% deal or something like that, and he wanted to give Rick a job, and he wanted to make an example of him, but not in a brutal way. Which I thought was pretty cool. And then Rick was the one that and Negan was. I'm sorry, I'm totally geeking out at this moment because it was just a fun scene. but at this point, it showed that Rick was the one that was telling him why this kind of style of thing doesn't work. And Negan was spitting all this stuff up, and he was coming off very desperate, in my opinion. And then Rick spills the bean about the Garbage Pail Kids with Simon, and then Negan knew the deal was off, and he's just like, "Oh fuck."
Yeah, that was good, and lots of credit to Jeffrey Dean for his acting there in the moment when you see him clue in about the garbage people and what happened. You can see him like putting the whole thing together in his head, and I like that registered. And how hard is it to believe that Rick didn't want his people to live as 75% kings, right?
Right. Exactly. And he didn't even like question Rick about Simon, because he already knew that Simon has done this type of shit before, right? He's pulled this maneuver. Maybe it was. And that this kind of clicked in my mind when I was watching him. Like, so I don't think Negan was involved with what happened at the ocean side. I think that was all Simon.
That could be. Yeah, I guess we don't have any indication. I mean, we really don't know what went down at all, right? I mean, we've heard the women tell us what happened, but there hasn't been any kind of flashback scene or anything like that, right?
No, there hasn't been. We just know that there's no men and there's no male boys over, like I think it was like 12 or something brutal. But now that we have that information, it has Simon written all over it.
Right. Very well could be, yeah.
So, oh man, it's just some riveting stuff, and I love that they gave Stephen Ogg, because he's such an entertaining person.
Yeah.
I love that they gave him so much to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember. So I didn't do any pre-reading when Simon came onto the show, and it took. I'm also a gamer, so it took me a couple of seasons to finally clue in, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is the dude from Grand Theft Auto, right? He's the whole reason that game was awesome, and here he is, maybe kind of doing the same sort of shtick, but he's doing it so well, I don't really care,
Exactly.
Well, I like the other lieutenant. I liked him a lot. The guy who was just, pardon me?
Gavin, right?
Yeah, I liked Gavin. I thought he was a complex character, and that's the kind of character I want to see, because I think with zombie and apocalyptic fiction, there's a real part of it is sort of this weird daydreaming that I do as an adult about, like, what if I was in this situation? And so I like seeing the conflicted, agonized, and with Gavin also very tired all the time. Like, I just don't need this shit today, please. So I think they did a really good job casting all of the saviors, really.
Yeah, the savior lieutenants. The one thing that kind of was confusing a little bit, and that was kind of during the second watch through, was the complete omission of Eugene, just because I know he's busy. He's making bullets with Father Blind Man, but it was a little bit bizarre knowing that this was kind of the final push going towards the hilltop, and Eugene was just absolutely nowhere to be found. Did that bother you at all, or is that just me?
Well, I've had a tough time with Eugene on the show, the character entirely, because he's another one where, like where we were talking about not knowing where Dwight's loyalties lie, if they lie anywhere other than Dwight. With Eugene, I also don't know that it's like what exactly is happening, but it's less interesting for some reason. And I dig the Eugene character. Yes. And I think, the acting is spot on, but there's something about him being the captive and this whole arc that is just not pulling me in so much.
I completely agree. And I completely agree with you with Josh McDermott being a great actor, and he does Eugene well. And I think a couple episodes ago when it focused on Eugene with Father Gabriel, like that was the bright moment for Tyler and I talking about it, was when Eugene was telling everyone to put their hard hats on and making that one, savior kind of, woman taking egg orders and stuff like that. Eugene is best when he is that weird kind of, funny Eugene. I was getting really sick of just the, showing Josh McDermott, with the trembling lip every single scene. So I completely agree with you.
Yeah, but what do you think? Do you think on the show is Eugene a savior? Is he happy there? Would he rather be with the survivors? Because I don't even think I can tell.
At this point, I think that's why they put someone like Father Gabriel, mix him back with Eugene, because he's going to sit there and with, his blind wisdom now, he's going to kind of talk him back into this, especially when, Rick's side kind of it starts to win even more so than they have been. This is just pure speculation. I don't know shit, but and this is completely, Eugene's character is completely different from the comic book, but that's just my take on it. But yeah, I mean, that's, the episode kind of ends with a little bit of a weird cliffhanger, one that I didn't expect and I didn't know I wanted. It's just, a close up of Negan kind of escapes Rick, because Rick basically gets the upper hand of beating his ass, and then Negan kind of escapes him, and then we don't see him again. First, you get Simon's kind of rally to the saviors on his side. And at that point, I thought Negan was going to walk up, and that was going to be kind of the end of Simon. He was going to see Simon saying the shit that he was saying, trying to get him, all the people on his side, Simon being the new Negan, and then with knowing what he did with the Garbage Pail Kids and then seeing him try to take over, I thought Negan was just going to kind of stroll up and kill Simon in this episode.
Yeah, I was expecting more or less the same thing. I actually wasn't expecting the death, but I thought, and the shots were leading me to think that, right? Because you could see the alley or whatever it was behind them. Absolutely. And it was perfectly set up for Negan to come around the corner. So maybe that was intentional. But yeah, that's what I was expecting. And, I can't say that I was 100% happy with the very final scene. It was not, I don't feel like Negan had ample time to get away from Rick, especially to like get away and pass out, and
sure,
that was a bit weird to me, I thought. But I'll suspend my disbelief and see where they go with it. So
yeah, and it just seems so, I don't know, it's just like, is Negan really in any danger with Jadis? But I mean, he has a gun trained on him, but how much can you train a gun on someone like Negan, who's basically, you have the Joker captive, he's got all the lives, and you're driving and have a gun trained on him. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised with the first 10 minutes of next episode of him just kind of crashing the car or doing something like that. But who knows? I don't know. It was a little bit bizarre. It was almost too cute for an episode this awesome. The ending was just like, oh, and then here's a twist. We got a Shyamalan twist. Hey, what do you think about that? And it's just like this episode was better than that.
Yeah, I feel the same way for sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, that is the episode. And as we do on DGT Live when we're reviewing The Walking Dead, we like to rate this episode, or the episode we're talking about, on a scale of 0 to 5, and decimals are okay. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm going to give The Key, which was episode 12 of The Walking Dead season 8. Man, I think I gave the last episode like a 1.5 or something. It was one of the worst episodes, and what a bounce back. And now this episode got me excited for the remaining season, which was great, because last episode, man, I was at an all-time low for excitement. I wasn't even interested to watch The Key. Goddamn, am I glad I did. I'm going to give this one a good 4.5 out of 5. Not the best episode I've ever seen, but goddamn near it. I thought it was great. Mr. Ted from Cardsphere, what did you think about The Key?
So 4.5 is actually the number that I had in my head. I watched it, twice since Sunday. Well, actually, the first time I watched it was Monday, so I've watched it twice, the past 2 days, and the watching it the second time, it did not drag at all. It instead let me, absorb more of what was going on and think about it a little bit. And I'm really hoping that they can keep the momentum up, and that the rest of the season is going to be like at this tempo, because they just can't bring us back to more walking through the foliage, as you say. It just won't.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. 4.5 from both people. That's pretty big numbers, especially coming off that last episode last week. And this is the point where I'm going to talk about my other special guest. This was the Silver City Brewery from right down the street in the Seattle area. Well, actually, it's a little bit more of a jaunt. It's in Bremerton, so a couple miles away, but pretty damn close. This was the Superfly India Pale Ale. It felt like an unfiltered IPA, 6.5%. Thank you so much again, Christian, for hooking this one up from Northwest Beverage. I'm going to give this one some pretty big numbers as well. This was a delicious IPA. Silver City does great things. Nice, clean, for an unfiltered IPA, nice, clean, like pillowy, cloudy head on it. Great body. I'm going to say a 4.0 out of 5 for my beer. You kind of told us what you thought about your cider. You willing to give it a little rating, Ted?
Yeah, well, like I said, as far as a cider, it pretty much tastes like cider.
So it achieved its goal.
Slightly alcoholic apple juice, but maybe instead I'll take the time to ask you if you know why it's not why you shouldn't be drinking beer out of the Glen glass.
Well, yeah, it's like I said, I usually drink out of the Rick. However, I just felt like I'd be cheating on my regular co-host, so I made an exception. I'll probably stub my toe and fall down the stairs, after I turn the camera off because of it. But I did what I did. I reap what I sow.
Right, but you know what the worst part of it is, right? You shouldn't be drinking beer out of that glass, because beer has a head.
Oh, yes! You just earned your spot anytime. No.
I've been holding on to that for 50 minutes now.
Oh, you are a true professional, Ted. You are a true professional. So thank you so much for joining me today. Ted, from the Card Sphere, where can the good kids find you?
www.cardsphere.com, and we've got a subreddit, an active Discord community, and if you are a Magic the Gathering player, check us out.
Awesome. And you could probably hit you up on Twitter, right?
Absolutely, Twitter. All the internets. We got all the internets.
All the internets, all the social medias. You could find me on Twitter at the Orzhov Dunn. That's right. That's a Magic the Gathering reference as well. You could also find me on Facebook and Instagram at John Dunning. And you can find me right here on this very station. They Said, We Said. I want to just kind of tell everyone, this is the point where I kind of tell everyone what's coming up. Tony and I filmed the first episode of Is This News? So that should be coming out probably this Friday. Episode's a lot of fun. That new series is a lot of fun. I can't wait for you guys to see it. Also, back next week we'll have more Walking Dead and some more Hive Mind coming up as well. So for Ted from the Card Sphere, I'm John. Spread the disease. We'll see you next week.